guess you can see that.
All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be running this trim down the center of the back, which is the center of this pattern right here. So first thing I'm going to do is pin it where I want it, down the center. This is the back, so we wouldn't have a seam. It's done on the fold anyway. Though, as you saw, my front is also going to be on the fold. Now, when I get to about here, I have to decide where, this is how long my piece is going to be. So we'll cut it off with a little extra. And then I have to decide where I'm going to meet at the shoulders. Now, that's usually about 8 inches down from 6 to 8 inches. This is 7 right there, and that looks good to me. I'm going to have seam allowance. I like to use the pattern as a guide so that I can match it exactly the same on the other side. So I'm going to come up so that I come right through to the point of this quatrefoil here, and it's going to come underneath here. Now notice there's a gold here, and I happen to have a gold here, and those look good to me. So I will be coming up, I'm going to fold this down, I'll be coming up from this and meeting the edge there. So I'm going to put pins in that. And I'm going to cut off extra in case I decide I want to change it later. I want to do the same on this side. Again, I want the same gold. I want it to meet about the same place. So I'll be pulling up from here. Now this is the center of my design right here. I was going up the middle of that. That's the center. So I would be pretty much overlapping the same amount on this side. So I can, but again, it's nice using patterns. This pattern I can see there's a little bit of, looks like a pineapple right there. And this line comes in right next to it to the bottom of it. So this line should come in right next to it to the bottom of it. And if I were to fold this back to the center, I should see both of these meeting at the same place, which they don't. There would be right. And this should meet the edge of this here. And if I look at the designs on here, there should be one full one here, about a half on each side. So I'm going to pin this. I might have to adjust it, but I'm going to pin this right now, because this is what looks like it's good for me. Now again, this comes off right about the middle of that design. And this should come off right at the middle of that design. So they both look good. Now, I want to cut this. So it's hidden by this. So that when I come up the middle, this is what the design is going to be. The little bit of gold on both sides coming out. You see the 3 white. This is fine. So I'll put a pin here. And again, fold this out of the way. And I'm going to glue these 2 down. Let me cut the extra off this. Now I'm going to stop the stitch witchery before the seam allowance. Because when I do the shoulder seam, I don't want this in the seam allowance. So we're going to cut it off a little before the seam allowance. So we need a steam iron and some stitch witchery. For this you use the wide stitch witchery because it's wide. And if you pin your trim down the center, you should be able to just slide your stitch witchery underneath the edge. Now I'm going to cut the stitch witchery so that it stops. Slide it under this edge. So it stops before my seam allowance up here. I can always add to it, but it's harder to take it off. So it's under there and I can't see it, and it's in place. You can do both sides. I forgot something, and that is that this particular trim shrinks when you iron it. This may be a problem, and so I might have to remeasure these. It doesn't shrink much, so I have gotten away with it, but it would have been better to have just simply gone through and pre-shrunk the whole thing. You pre-shrink it by simply ironing the whole trim that you're going to use. All right, looks like it's okay. So I'll do this side. In this? No. I need to set it on steam. It's turned itself off. Again, that's why we use glass head pins, so we can iron right on top of these pins. All right, now I'll do this side. The same thing. Stopping a 1/2 inch before the edge. Make sure it's still lined up. I'm ironing toward the back so that if it does shrink, it'll pull in some of this extra trim that I have on the ends rather than shrink up on the put this down and put pins in it. Actually, I think I'm going to shrink this. You know, I've got extra fabric on both ends. It should be fine. I'm going to shrink it. So. If you watch, you'll see it pull into the iron. Very little. If it had a lot of metal in it, it would shrink even more. Okay. Put this back on here. Okay, so put some stitch witchery down. Middle of this, leaving seam allowance at the top. the bottom's probably off your screen, but if you see the top, just the line. And the same on the other side. Okay, now this is where the applique is going to go, but we were not going to put it on until we have sewn it down. The gluing is only to hold it and keep everything from shifting and moving and puckering until we have it sewn. And then we come back and we'll put the applique with stitch witchery and then sew it down. All right, but for now, now this is ready to be sewn. I'm going to leave the pins in it. They're not in the way of where the stitch, I'm going to be stitching both edges of these. So this is good to go. Now we're going to do the other side exactly the same. And I'm not cutting these off yet, and the extra, not until after it's sewn and I'm ready to. So we put this aside to sew. And we're going to do the same thing with the front. Take the pattern off now. The ruler on the table so I'd know the field of vision for the camera. Try to stay on a good way. Now the good side of this fabric, most fabric is usually the inside. On this particular brocade, the good side is the side. The background is satiny and the design is matte. The other side, the background's matte and the design is satiny. Now you might prefer that. This fabric can be used both ways, but whatever side you decide to use, you need to stick with it.